the very top of the world stands a wall of ice 700 feet high, so old that men have forgotten why it exists in the first place. A single road runs south, past forests and swamps and rivers, past castles and market towns, past 500,000 people, all the way to a city built around a throne made of melted swords. That road is 1,000 leagues long. It is the spine of Westeros, and almost no one ever walks the whole of it. This is that walk, a slow journey down the length of a continent, watching the land change beneath your feet, meeting the people who live along the way, and hearing what the realm actually sounds like from its coldest edge to its hottest heart. We begin where the map ends, at the wall of ice. We finish at the chair of blades, and the truth of Westeros lives in the long, quiet distance between the two. The first thing you notice is that you can see it long before you reach it. For a day or more, the wall sits on the northern horizon as a pale line, low and dull, easy to mistake for a bank of cloud or a trick of the winter light. Then the land rises, and the trees thin, and the line resolves into something that the mind refuses to accept. It is not a cloud, it is ice, and it does not end where a wall should end. It climbs and climbs until your neck aches from looking, and still it goes on above you. 700 feet of it. That is the number men give, though numbers do little when you are standing at the base with your head tipped back. The wall runs 100 leagues from end to end, from the grey waters in the east to the mountains in the west, sealing off the top of the continent as if some giant had drawn a knife across the map. It is the largest thing built by the hands of men anywhere in the known world, and no one now living remembers who began it. Up close, the ice is not white. It is blue and grey and green, layered in bands where centuries of snowfall have pressed down and frozen hard as stone. In the flat light of morning, it looks dead. But when the sun swings round and strikes it fully, the whole face begins to weep. Meltwater runs down it in thin, bright sheets, and the surface shines and sweats and seems, for a few hours, almost alive. By evening, the cold clamps down again, and the tears freeze in place, and the wall goes back to being what it truly is, a mountain of ice pretending to be a fortress. The cold here is the cold of the ground itself, a constant, patient thing that lives in the stone and the air and never lifts when the sun rises. It gets into your boots and your gloves and the seams of your cloak. It finds the gaps. Men who live beneath the wall learn to move slowly and cover everything, because bare skin against iron in that cold will tear when you pull it away. And there is the wind. The wall makes its own weather. Air spills down off that great height in gusts that come without warning, carrying loose snow that stings the face like grit. On the worst days, the wind howls along the base of the ice for hours, and the sound of it is the loudest thing in an otherwise silent country. Men who have spent years there say you stop hearing it. Newcomers never sleep the first few nights for the noise. There are ways to the top, for those with reason to climb. A great winch cage hauls men up the southern face on iron chains, groaning and swaying the whole way, and the ride is slow enough that you can watch the world shrink beneath you. From the walk along the crest, the wind is worse, and the drop on either side is enough to stop the breath. But the view is the thing men climb for. Look north, and you see what the wall was built to hold back. The land beyond falls away into forest. Mile upon mile of dark pine and sentinel and soldier trees, unbroken, stretching to the edge of sight and past it. Men call it the haunted forest, and from the top of the wall, you understand the name at once. Nothing moves that you can see. No smoke rises from it. No road cuts through it. It is a green-black sea with no far shore. Somewhere out there live the people the realm calls wildlings, and older things besides, in numbers no one south of the ice can count. To stand on the wall and look north is to look at everything Westeros has decided it does not want and cannot tame. Then turn and look south. The change is total. The forest gives way to open, rolling country. A road runs away from the foot of the wall and vanishes into the distance, dead straight for a time and then bending with the low hills. That is the King's Road, and it is the same road that ends 1,000 leagues on at the gates of the capital. From up here, it looks like a thread laid across the land. Everything men want lies down that thread. Every castle, every field, every market, every warm hall and crowded town. To look south from the wall is to look at the whole rest of the world, laid out and waiting, small and green and far away. This is the first lesson the road teaches, and it teaches it before you have taken a single step. The wall stands between two directions. Behind it, the empty white north that no one will have. Before it, the long green road down to everything they will fight and die to keep. A man standing on the ice holds both in a single turn of the head. Below and slightly to the south sits the castle that guards this stretch of the wall. Castle Black. From above it looks like almost nothing. A scatter of towers and halls and outbuildings huddled at the base of that vast pale cliff. Dark timber and grey stone against all that ice. It has no southern wall of its own, because it does not need one. Its enemies come from the north, and its back is protected by the largest structure in the world. Down at ground level, the castle is plainer still. Much of it is old and half ruined. Towers stand empty, their windows dark, their doors long since shut. Only a portion of the place is still lived in and kept warm, and the rest is left to the wind and the crows. It has the feel of a great house that once held many and now holds few, its owners rattling around in rooms built for a fuller time. Cut into the ice at Castle Black is the tunnel that makes the wall a gate as well as a barrier. A passage runs clean through the base of the wall from the southern side to the northern, low and narrow and black, its walls sheathed in ice, iron bars set across it at intervals. It is the only way through for many leagues in either direction. Men with torches lead you into it, and the cold there is a different cold, close and wet and utterly without wind. Your voice comes back off the ice. Water drips somewhere ahead, and then the far end opens, and you step out on the north side, into the shadow of the haunted forest, with the whole weight of the wall at your back. Most who come to this place come from the south and go no further north than that tunnel's mouth. They come to leave men here, or to trade, or because duty or crime has brought them to the edge of the world. Almost none of them will ever stand on the ice and look both ways as you have. They see only the wall of cold that ends their country, and they turn around, glad to be pointed south again. But the journey we are making runs the other way, down that thread of road, through everything it touches, from this frozen edge to the warm and crowded heart of the realm. Before we take the first step, it is worth standing a while longer at the foot of the ice, feeling the cold press in and the wind come down, watching the meltwater run in the afternoon sun, because everything that follows moves away from this. The land will grow softer and greener and louder with every league. The cold will loosen its grip. The road will fill with people, and the great wall of ice will sink back down to a pale line on the northern horizon, and then to nothing at all, which is the fate the realm has always intended for it. Stay a night at Castle Black, and the place begins to make sense in a way it never does from the top of the ice. The day starts before the sun. In that country, the sun is a slow, reluctant thing, and long before it clears the trees to the east, the castle is already awake. You hear it before you see it. Boots on frozen boards, the clang of a hammer somewhere in the dark, the stamp and snort of horses in the stables, and under all of it, the low complaint of the wind against the wall, which never fully stops. Men move by torchlight, and by the pale glow the ice gives off even at night. They keep their heads down and their words short, because talking wastes breath, and breath is warmth. The men who live here are called the Night's Watch, and they call each other brothers. Few of them chose one another, and fewer still would have crossed paths anywhere else. They wear only black cloaks, black mail, black boots, so that the order is known everywhere as the Black Brothers, or simply the Crows. When a man takes the black, he gives up his family name, his lands, any title he held, and any claim his children might have made. He swears for life. The vow has no term and no honourable end. Once said, it holds until death. The men who swear it come from every corner of the realm and every kind of life. Some are younger sons of small houses, with no lands coming to them and nowhere else to go. Some are men who wanted a life of purpose and found the songs more stirring than the reality. But most, in truth, are sent. The Watch has long been the realm's answer to the men it does not want. Poachers, thieves, killers, rapers and debtors, given the choice between the noose and the wall. A great many choose the wall and regret it, and stay because there is nowhere left to run. Whatever a man was before, at Castle Black, he becomes one of three things. The Rangers ride north beyond the wall, into the haunted forest, to patrol and hunt and watch. The most dangerous work the Order does, and the most respected. The builders keep the wall itself standing, cutting ice and stone, tending the winch and the tunnel, shoring up what the cold and the years wear away. The stewards do everything else. They cook, they mend, they keep the ravens, they tend the fires and the sick and the accounts. Without the stewards, the rangers would starve and freeze, though a proud ranger will rarely admit it. The common hall is the warm heart of the castle, and after the cold outside it hits you like a wall of its own. Heat and wood smoke and the reek of stew and unwashed men packed close. The food is plain, and there is never quite enough of it. Salt beef and salt cod, hard bread, onions, thick barley soup, whatever the hunt brought in. Ale when there is ale, and a rough black beer they brew themselves. Men eat fast and close together, elbow to elbow along the benches, because the far corners of the hall stay cold no matter how the fires are stoked. The talk, when there is talk, runs to weather and rangings and old grievances. There is little laughter, but there is a kind of rough fellowship, the closeness of men who have no one else in the world but each other. Out in the yard, the day's work goes on whatever the weather. The training yard is where new men are broken to the life, drilled with sword and shield and spear by a master at arms who has no patience and less mercy. Green boys who have never held a blade are set against each other and against hardened killers, and the lessons are delivered with bruises. The ring of steel on steel carries across the castle all morning. Nearby the smiths keep their forges lit, and the smell of hot iron cuts through the cold. Horses are shod, arrows fletched, mail mended link by link. Everything here is repair. Nothing is new. The Order has not been able to afford new for a long time. Above it all In a tower of their own, the ravens live. The maester keeps them, and the stewards under him, in a warm, dim room thick with the smell of birds. The ravens are the watch's voice to the rest of the realm. Black messengers carrying word south to the lords and the castles and the capital, and carrying word back. The birds are clever and loud and ill-tempered, and the men who tend them speak to them by name. Through those birds, the far edge of the world stays tied, by the thinnest of threads, to everything south of the ice. In these years, the man who commands all of it is Jor Mormon, called the Old Bear, Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. He was a lord once of Bear Island in the north, with lands and a seat and a son to follow him. He gave all of it up and took the black by choice, passing his island and his title to that son, and he has held the command at Castle Black for years by the time you arrive. He is old and grey and hard, plain-spoken, feared and respected in equal measure. On his shoulder rides a raven of his own, a strange half-tame bird that has learned to mangle a few human words and croaks them back at him, begging for corn. The old bear and his raven are a fixture of the place, and the sight of them says something true about the watch. Even at the top, the life is spare and strange and shared with crows. Castle Black is not alone. The wall runs 100 leagues, and no single castle could watch all of it, so the order keeps its strength spread along the ice. Once there were 19 castles strung out from sea to sea. Now only 3 are still manned. Far to the west, where the wall meets the mountains, stands the Shadow Tower, a lonely fastness watching the wild high country, and the passmen call the Gorge. Far to the east, where the wall meets the sea, sits Eastwatch by the sea, a grim port castle where the black ships come and go, and where the watch keeps its one thin link to the water. Castle Black holds the middle, and the road. Between these 3, the whole length of the ice is guarded, and between them lie mile after mile of empty, abandoned castles, dark and roofless, given back to the snow. Once you have spent a day among them, the weight of it settles on you. The watch was built for a realm of thousands. It once had the men to hold 19 castles and range far into the north, and never leave a stretch of ice unwatched. Now it has a few hundred, aging and ill-supplied, holding 3 castles out of 19, and struggling to fill even those. The great empty towers of Castle Black are not an accident of design. They are the shape of a slow decline, made of stone. This is the first hard truth the road teaches. The men at the very top of the map live plain, cold, difficult lives in the service of the oldest promise the realm ever made: to stand between the world and whatever waits in the dark, and there are almost none of them left to keep it. When you finally leave Castle Black and turn south, the road does not carry you at once into the wild. For the first stretch, you are still on land the watch calls its own. The order does not live on the ice alone. Below the wall lies a broad band of country granted to the Night's Watch long ago, meant to feed and supply the men who guard it. The oldest part, closest to the wall, is simply called the Gift, a strip of land 25 leagues deep, given to the order in the earliest days of Westeros, so that its farms and villages might keep the Black Brothers fed. Later, a second strip was added below it, as broad again, granted by a queen of old, who came to the wall and pitied the men she found there. That newer band is the new Gift. Together they make a country 50 leagues deep, running the whole width of the realm, from sea to sea, and every acre of it belongs to the watch. It should be full of life. 50 leagues of good northern land is enough to feed thousands, and once it did. The idea behind it was simple and sound. The watch guards the wall. The gift feeds the watch. Farmers work the fields and pay their rents to the order itself, and in return, the Black Brothers stand between them and whatever comes out of the north. For a long time, it worked as it was meant to. Ride through it now, and you would not guess any of that. The first thing you notice is how quiet it is. The road runs south through open, rolling country, and for long stretches you pass nothing living but crows and the wind. Then you come on the marks of people who are no longer there. A stone farmhouse with its roof fallen in, and grass growing up through the floor. A field that was ploughed once, in straight furrows still faintly visible under the turf, now gone to weed and scrub. A holdfast on a low hill, its wooden hall collapsed, its well choked with leaves. Villages that were villages within living memory, standing empty, the doors hanging open, the hearths cold. The land is abandoned. Everywhere you look, you see the shape of a life that has simply been left behind. There are reasons the gift has emptied, and none of them are quick. The first is the raiders. This land sits directly below the wall, which means it sits directly in the path of the wildlings, the free folk who live north of the ice and come south when they can, over the wall or around it, to take what they need. For generations they have raided the gift. They burn the villages, drive off the livestock, carry away women and stores and whatever else they can move, and vanish back into the north. A farmer can rebuild a burned barn once. He cannot rebuild it a third and fourth time and still have the heart to stay. Slowly, family by family, the people of the gift gave up and drifted south to safer ground, and the watch, short of men itself, could not protect them well enough to make them stay. The second reason is the cold. This is the far north, and the growing season is short even in the best years. When winter comes, and in this country, winters can last for years, the fields freeze hard and yield nothing. The people who work them either lay in enough stores to survive, or they starve or leave. Each long winter thinned the gift a little more, and each summer fewer came back. And behind both of those lies, the slow decline of the order itself. A strong watch, thousands of men, could have garrisoned the gift, patrolled its roads, driven off raiders, and made it a place worth farming. The watch that remains cannot. It can barely hold 3 castles on the wall. It has no men to spare for a countryside 50 leagues deep, and so the countryside has quietly slipped out of its grasp. The land still belongs to the order on parchment. In truth, it belongs to the grass now. Not all of it is dead. Here and there a village still holds on, and the strangest of them is the one nearest the wall. Molestown is small and mean and mostly underground. The folk there dug their homes down beneath the earth to escape the wind and the cold. From the road, you see little more than a few hovels and a shabby inn, and would never guess how many people live tunnelled in below. It is the one place near Castle Black where the Black Brothers can find what the wall denies them, and the men speak of visiting the moles half in jest and half in shame. Its underground warren survives because it is close enough to the wall to shelter under the Order's protection. Most of the gift is not that lucky. Farther south, you begin to pass the ruins of grander things. Old towers stand alone on hilltops, roofless and empty, built to watch roads that no longer carry traffic. One such place is a holdfast on an island in a lake. A tall stone tower crowned with battlements, gone to rust and rot, abandoned like the rest, and slowly sinking back into the water and the reeds. These were the seats of Smallfolk, who once held the gift under the watch, and they are hollow now, home to nesting birds and little else. A traveller passing beneath them feels the age of the country pressing down. People built here and hoped here and gave it up. Then, as the ruins thin behind you, the forest begins. You feel it before you fully see it. The open, empty farmland gives way to scattered stands of trees, and the stands thicken and close. Before long, the road is running through true northern woods. Tall pines and dark sentinels crowding to the edge of the track, the light going green and dim under the branches. The wind changes its sound in the trees. The ruins fall away. Ahead of you, the King's Road runs on straight and narrow into a forest that will keep you company for a very long time. This is the beginning of the real North, the vast wooded country of the Starks, and the frontier of the Watch is behind you now. Look back, though, before the trees close it off, and the whole of the gift lays out its story without a word. A broad, generous country, granted long ago to feed the men who guard the realm's edge. And slowly, over centuries of raids and long winters, and a dwindling order that could not hold it, given back to the wild. The empty farmhouses and the choked wells and the roofless towers say the same thing the great vacant halls of Castle Black said from the top of the ice. The Watch was built for a realm of thousands, and the land was built to feed that realm. Both have outlived the men who filled them. That is what the gift teaches you as you ride out of it. You do not need anyone to explain the decline of the Night's Watch. You have only to look at the fields going back to grass, and the doors standing open on empty houses, and understand that a whole country meant to serve the wall has quietly, patiently, begun to disappear. The forest that swallows the King's Road below the gift does not let go for a long time. This is the deep north now, the great wooded country the Starks have ruled for thousands of years, and the first thing it teaches you is patience. You can ride for days and see nothing change but the light. The trees are mostly evergreen. Tall pines stand close along the road, and among them rise the sentinels. Great dark trees named for the way they seem to stand watch, their branches heavy, their tops lost overhead. Under such a canopy the world goes dim and green even at midday. The floor of the forest is soft with fallen needles, and the air smells of resin and cold earth and, more often than not, of snow. For in the north snow is not a thing that comes only in winter. Even in the long summers of fall of it is no surprise, dusting the pines white in the morning and melting off by noon, and the men here think nothing of it. The summers themselves are short. Farther south, a summer can feel like a settled thing, a season a man might build his whole life around. Here, it is borrowed time. The growing months are few, the winters long and sometimes years in length, and everyone who lives in this country carries that knowledge in the way they work and store and save. Nothing is wasted. A northern farmstead in high summer is already thinking about the dark, laying in wood and salt and grain against a winter that has no fixed end. And there is a great deal of country to cross. What defeats a traveller from the south is not the cold, but the scale of the place. The north is larger than all the other kingdoms of the realm put together, and most of it is trees and stone and empty distance. You do not pass from one town to the next in an afternoon here. You ride a day and then another, and the forest is still the forest. Holdfasts and villages are scattered thin across this immensity like seeds thrown by a careless hand, and the spaces between them are measured in leagues and days, not miles and hours. When you do come on people, they are few and hard and practical. A northern holdfast is a small thing. A stout timber hall, a palisade, a huddle of houses, smoke rising from the roofs. The folk who live in it are wrapped in wool and fur and leather, plain-spoken and unhurried, wary of strangers but bound by old rules of hospitality that run deeper here than almost anywhere. They farm what the short season allows, they hunt the forest, they cut wood, and they endure. There is little softness in their lives and little in their manner, but there is a steadiness to them that the land itself seems to have taught. Up in the high country, west of the road, live the mountain clans of the north. They keep to the cold hills. The Wolves, the Norries, the Flints, the Liddles and others, herding goats and sheep across ground too poor and too steep for anything gentler. They are poor in coin and proud beyond it. They keep no great castles, bow to no southern fashion, and follow their own chiefs, who in turn answer to the Starks in Winterfell and to almost no one else. A traveller rarely meets them on the King's Road. They belong to the heights, and the heights keep them. For all the emptiness, the road itself is a marvel. The King's Road runs the length of Westeros, and here in the north it is often the only made road for 100 leagues in any direction. It is a narrow, ancient track laid down long ago, kept just clear enough to pass, running straight through forest and over stream and across leagues of nothing. It is your lifeline. Leave it, and the north closes around you at once. Stay on it, and it carries you south past the occasional inn, the occasional woodcutter, the occasional band of travellers moving the other way with their heads down against the wind. The weather is a companion you do not choose. Rain comes cold and sudden. Fog fills the low ground at dawn and hangs in the trees. The wind, when the forest opens, cuts straight through cloth to the bone. And the nights are long and very dark, so dark that a fire becomes the centre of the whole world, and men draw close to it and speak little and listen to the trees. This is a country where the dark is a real thing, not merely the absence of a lamp, and it shapes the people who live in it. They do not fear it exactly. They respect it, the way a man respects deep water. There is one more thing the forest shows you, if you know to look. Now and again, deep among the pines, you catch sight of a different tree, a weirwood, pale as bone, its bark white and its leaves dark red, and carved into its trunk a face. The eyes weep red sap. The mouth is set in some expression you cannot quite name. These are the heart trees of the old gods, the nameless gods of forest and stream and stone that the north has kept faith with since before there were kings or castles anywhere in Westeros. In the south men worship the seven in painted seps. Here the gods have no names and no temples, only the trees, and the north remembers them. That memory is the key to the whole country. The north does not forget. It remembers its old gods and its old wars and its old grievances against the south and the names of the dead going back 100 generations. The long winters teach a people to hold on to things, because whatever you fail to keep, you will not easily replace. And so the north holds, to its faith, to its customs, to its old loyalties, and to a wariness of everything that comes up the King's Road from the warmer lands below. This is the lesson the deep north presses on you mile after mile, and it is worth carrying south with you. The north is not a castle and a lord. It is not even chiefly a place of people at all. It is a vast, thinly peopled country of forest and mountain, and cold, so large that a man could lose an army in it and never find them again. The handful of folk scattered across it have been shaped by the same forces that shape the land. Long cold has made them hard and patient. Long dark has made them wary. And long memory has made them faithful to old things in a way the South has largely forgotten. So you ride on, and the pines close overhead again, and the weirwood with its weeping face falls away behind you into the green gloom. The road runs south, straight and narrow and ancient, and it will run this way for many days yet. Somewhere far ahead, past all these leagues of trees, the forest thins and the country opens, and a great grey castle stands over a town, its walls warmed from within by fires that never go out. But that is still a long way off. For now there is only the road and the cold and the vast, patient silence of the north, keeping its own counsel as it has always done. At last the forest gives way. The pines thin, the land rises and opens, and there before you stands the thing all those days of riding have been leading toward. A great grey castle on a rise of ground, with a town huddled at its feet and smoke rising from 100 roofs into the cold northern sky. This is Winterfell, seat of House Stark, and it has stood here in one form or another for 8,000 years. The first thing you notice is that it does not look like a southern castle. There is nothing graceful about it, nothing built to be admired. Winterfell is a sprawling, heavy, deliberate castle. It has 2 rings of grey granite wall enclosing a jumble of towers and keeps and yards that seem to have grown together over the centuries rather than been planned. The outer wall stands high, the inner wall higher still, and between the two runs a wide moat. The stone is old and weathered and streaked with lichen, and it gives the whole place a look of enormous, settled permanence, as though it had not been built at all, but had simply always been there, growing out of the ground like the hills around it. And it is warm. This is the strange miracle of Winterfell, the feat of engineering that no other great castle in the realm can claim. Beneath the castle run natural hot springs, and the Starks who built the place long ago had the wit to make use of them. Hot water is carried through the walls in a maze of pipes, so that the stone itself is warm to the touch even in the depth of winter. Steam rises from the walls on cold mornings. The glass gardens, warmed the same way, grow fruit and flowers when the ground outside is frozen hard. In a country where cold is the great enemy of all life, the Starks built a home that keeps the cold out with the living heat of the earth. That single fact tells you almost everything about the North and the family that rules it. They did not try to move somewhere gentler. They stayed, and they made the hard place livable. Pass through the gates and into the yards, and Winterfell comes alive around you. It is a working castle, not a showpiece, and it sounds like one. There is the ring of the smithy, the bark of dogs, the clatter of the training yard where boys and men work at swordplay under the eye of the master-at-arms. There are grooms and stable boys, kennelmen and cooks, washerwomen and carpenters, the whole great household of a lord who rules the largest kingdom in the realm. Ravens mutter in the maester's turret. Horses stamp in the stables. The kitchens send up the smell of bread and roasting meat. And somewhere a servant is always crossing a yard with an armful of something that needs carrying. At the heart of it all is the godswood, and here the mood changes entirely. Most southern castles keep a godswood as a courtesy, a small tame garden with a token tree. Winterfell's godswood is 3 acres of old-growth forest, dark and dense, kept as it has been kept for thousands of years. At its centre stands the heart tree, a great weirwood, its bark white as bone, its 5-fingered leaves dark red, and carved into its trunk a long, sad face, whose eyes seem to weep red sap. Before it lies a black pool, still and cold, fed by the hot springs, so that faint steam drifts across its surface even in the chill. This is where the Starks keep faith with the old gods. This is where they come to pray and to think, and to sit in silence among trees older than any king. There is a heaviness in the godswood, a watchfulness, that even a stranger feels the moment he steps beneath its branches. And beneath the castle, cut down into the earth, lies the other great sacred place of House Stark, the crypts. They are older than the castle above them, a long dark hall of stone lined with the tombs of the dead. Each tomb holds a Stark, and before each one sits a stone figure, a likeness of the man buried there, with a direwolf carved at his feet, and often an iron sword across his knees. The oldest of them are the kings of winter, the Starks who ruled the north as kings in their own right for thousands of years before there was ever a single throne in the south. The iron swords are said to keep the dead in their graves. The air down there is cold and still and smells of earth, and the torchlight throws long shadows across the stone faces of a family that stretches back further than almost any other in Westeros. To walk the crypts is to understand that for a Stark, the dead are not gone. They are still here, still counted, still part of the house. The family that rules all this in these years is small and quiet, and, by the standards of the South, remarkably plain. Its head is Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North, a man of middle years, grave and reserved, who wears his authority without display. He is not a lord who feasts to excess or dresses to impress or fills his hall with flattery. He rules the largest of the kingdoms with a steady, unglamorous sense of duty, and the men of the north follow him out of a deep and unquestioning trust. When Lord Eddard sits in judgment, and when the sentence is death, he swings the sword himself, because the old way of the north holds that the man who passes the sentence should carry it out. That single custom says as much about him as anything. He does not hide from the weight of what he does. Beside him is his lady wife Cailin, born a Tully of the Riverlands far to the south. She came north as a young woman to a strange cold country and a husband she barely knew, and she made Winterfell her home, though the southern warmth of her upbringing never entirely left her. She keeps the household, manages its people, and worries over her children with the sharp attention of a mother who has learned how quickly the north can take what it loves. Around the two of them are their children, a hall full of young Starks growing up between the warm walls, learning the yard and the godswood and the crypts, being shaped into the next keepers of this old and heavy inheritance. The life of the hall is of a piece with the family that keeps it. Winterfell's great hall is large and warm and busy, its long tables filled at meals with the household and the guests and the men of the garrison. The food is plentiful and plain: bread, meat, root vegetables, ale and northern wine, served without the elaborate ceremony of a southern court. Talk is direct. Boasting is rare. A guest who arrives is fed and sheltered and protected, for guest right is no small thing in the north, and to break it is among the blackest of sins. There is laughter here, and music sometimes, and the ordinary noise of many people living close together through a long dark season. There is little that is frivolous. Even the warmth of Winterfell has a purpose to it, and that is the truth of the place, the thing the whole castle presses on you the longer you stay within its walls. Winterfell is the north made into a home. It is old beyond easy reckoning, built to keep out a cold that would kill, warmed by the living heat of the earth, guarded above by grey stone and below by the stone kings of the dead. It is ruled by a family who make no clear distinction between duty and honour, who believe the two are the same word, and who have kept faith with their gods and their dead and their people through 8,000 years of winters. After all the empty leagues of forest, You come at last to the warm heart at the centre of that vast cold country, and then the road calls again, and it runs on south, out through the gates and back into the world. You do not pass straight from the castle gate to the open country. Between them lies the winter town, and it is worth pausing there before you ride on, because it tells you a truth about the north that the castle alone cannot. The winter town sits in the shadow of Winterfell's walls, a cluster of houses built of log and rough stone, their roofs steep to shed the snow. In the warm years, when you are likely to be passing through, most of it stands empty. Whole streets are shuttered and silent, the doors barred, the hearths cold. Perhaps a fifth of the houses have smoke rising from them. To a traveller from the south, it looks like a town half abandoned, a place that has seen better days and is quietly dying. That is the wrong reading entirely. The winter town is exactly what its name says. It is a town built for winter. When summer holds and the fields can be worked, the small folk of the north scatter across the land, living out on their crofts and in their little forest hamlets, tending what grows in the short bright season. But when winter comes, and in the north winter can last for years, the crofts become death traps. The snow buries the fields, the cold kills the unsheltered, and the people who cannot survive alone come in from the land to gather in the shadow of the castle. Then the winter town fills, the shuttered houses open, the hearths are lit, and the empty streets crowd with people who have come to wait out the dark close to the Lord who is bound to protect them. The half-empty town you ride through in summer is a town holding its breath, waiting for the season it was made for. The people who live in and around it are the ordinary folk of the north, and they are cut from the same hard cloth as the land itself. There are crofters who scratch a living from thin northern soil, growing oats and barley and root crops in the brief warm months, and salting away everything they can against the cold to come. There are foresters who work the endless pine and sentinel woods, felling timber, burning charcoal, hunting the deer and elk and boar that the forest gives up. Along the coasts and the rivers there are fisher folk, hauling in cod and salmon, drying and salting their catch on wooden racks that stand grey against the sky. It is a life of constant labour with little softness in it, lived always with one eye on the coming winter, and it breeds a people who are practical, enduring, and slow to complain. They are also, by the measure of the South, remarkably plain in their dealings. A northern smallfolk man says what he means and expects the same in return. There is little of the flattery and elaborate courtesy you would find in a southern market town. A stranger is met with a level, measured look and a certain wariness, for the north has long memory and a deep distrust of southern ways and southern promises. But once that stranger is accepted, once he has been given food and a place by the fire, everything changes, and this is the heart of it. For guest right is no empty phrase here. It is the oldest and most sacred of customs, older than the faith, older perhaps than the castles themselves. When a guest eats the bread and salt of a host's table beneath his roof, the two of them are bound. The host may not harm the guest while he shelters there, and the guest may not harm the host. It does not matter if they are enemies. It does not matter what blood lies between them. Bread and salt shared makes the bond, and to break it, to spill the blood of one who has eaten at your table, or to raise a hand against the man who has fed you, is among the very blackest of sins a northerner can name. The old gods are said to hate a man who breaks guest right, and the north has stories, told by every hearth, of the terrible ends that come to those who do. In a country this cold and this empty, where a traveller caught by the weather may live or die by whether a stranger takes him in. That custom is decoration nowhere. It is survival made into a law of the heart. The mood of these people is set by the land they live in, and the land is not gentle. The days are spent in work, and the work is hard, and the reward is simply that you and yours come through another year. The food is honest and filling and made to last. Oaten bread and black bread, salt beef and salt fish, thick stews of mutton and root vegetables, hard cheese, ale brewed dark and strong. In summer there is game and fresh fish, and what the glass gardens of a great house can spare. In winter there is what was saved, eaten carefully and counted. A northern feast is a real feast when it comes, and it comes on the great days. The harvest, a wedding, the visit of a lord, a name day in a holdfast. Then the ale flows, and there is roast meat and music, and the ordinary caution is set aside for a night. But no one forgets that the barrels have to last, and the feasting is never quite so reckless as it is in the warm south. Their faith is the old faith, the faith of the trees and the nameless gods. The same the Starks keep in their godswood. There are few septs in the north and fewer septons. Most northern Smallfolk have never seen a statue of the seven and would not know what to make of one. They pray, if they pray at all, before a weirwood or a stand of old trees, in silence, without priests or scripture. Their gods do not preach mercy or forgiveness. They are older and stranger than that. Gods of the wood and the winter, and the people who keep them are shaped in the same mould, steady, quiet, and unillusioned about the way the world works. And through all this moves the small, steady traffic of ordinary life. On the roads and tracks between the holdfasts, you meet the people who tie the scattered north together. There are traders with laden mules bringing salt up from the coast, or iron, or the small luxuries a remote holdfast cannot make for itself. There are peddlers with packs of needles and knives and ribbons. There are wandering singers glad of a warm haul and a meal. Carters hauling timber and grain. These travellers are the threads that keep the whole vast place from coming apart, carrying goods and news and marriages and stories from one lonely settlement to the next. Here is what to carry away from the winter town and the folk who live around it. The north runs deeper than its lords, for all that the lords hold the castles and the titles. Beneath them, and older than them, is a people whose customs are the true character of the region, the plain honesty, the deep wariness of the south, and above all, the sacred, unbreakable law of guest right. Strip away the great houses, and the north would still be the north, because the north is really these people and the hard code they live by. And that code, more than any wall or any castle, is what has held this cold country together through the long dark of 8,000 winters. South of Winterfell, the road runs on, and after a time the forests begin to thin. The pines fall away behind you, the land opens out, and you come at last into the Barrowlands, a wide rolling country of grass and wind that stretches on for days in every direction. After the closed dark of the Wolfswood, the sheer openness of it is a shock. There are no great trees here. There is only the long grass bending under the wind, the grey sky low above it, and the road running straight ahead through country that seems to have no edges. But the Barrowlands are not empty, and you learn this quickly. Everywhere across the grass rise the mounds, low green hills, some no bigger than a haystack, others the size of a lord's hall, scattered across the plain in their hundreds. These are the barrows, and they give the country its name. Each one is a grave. Beneath the turf lie the dead of a people so old that even their names are half lost. The first men who lived and ruled here before the Starks were kings, before the castles, before almost anything the maesters can put a date to. The largest of the mounds is said to hold the Barrow King himself, the first king of the first men, the man the old tales call the first to raise a crown in Westeros. Whether that is true, no one can say for certain. What is certain is that the whole plain is a burial ground, and you ride across the roof of it for days. It is a haunted feeling, riding through the Barrowlands, and even a practical man feels it. The mounds sit silent under the grass, weathered smooth by thousands of years of rain and snow, and the sight of them quiets a traveller and makes him keep his voice low. The wind never stops here. It comes off the open country in long, steady gusts that flatten the grass and hum in a man's ears. And in that endless wind, it is easy to believe the old stories the northern folk tell, that the barrows are best left alone, that the dead beneath them do not care to be disturbed, that a man who digs where he should not dig will bring something home he cannot send away. Whether you believe the stories or not, you do not stop to dig. You keep to the road, and you are glad when a holdfast comes into view. For the Barrowlands are not lordless. The greatest house of this country is House Dustin, and their seat is Barrowton, a town that has grown up in the shadow of the greatest barrow of all. The Dustins are an old and proud line, counting themselves among the first families of the north, and they hold the grass country the way the Starks hold the Wolfswood. Around them are the other lords of the open land, and their people are herders and horsemen more than foresters, running sheep and cattle and horses across the plains where crops would struggle. It is a different north than the one you left behind, but it is north still. The same hard weather, the same plain folk, the same old gods. Then, as you ride further south, the land begins to change again, and this time the change is a warning. The firm grass gives way slowly to softer ground. The road, which had run straight and dry across the plain, narrows and lifts itself onto a raised stone causeway, because the earth on either side is no longer earth a horse can trust. Pools of black water appear among the reeds. The air grows heavy and damp and carries a smell of rot and standing water. You have come to the edge of the great bog that guards the neck of the north, and rising out of that bog, straddling the only firm road through it, stand the broken towers of Moat Cailin. No sight in all the north quite matches Moat Cailin, and it is not beautiful. It is a ruin. Where once there stood 20 great towers of black basalt, only 3 are left whole enough to stand, and even those are cracked and leaning and green with moss and creeping vines. The rest have fallen, toppled into the bog over the long centuries, their stones sunk out of sight beneath the black water, so that a traveller sees only jagged stumps and the ghosts of walls that used to be. It looks, at first glance, like a place long dead, a corpse of a castle left to rot in the swamp. And yet Moat Cailin is, and always has been, the strongest fortress in the north, perhaps in all of Westeros, and it holds that title precisely because of where it stands. For this is the throat of the north. The great bog of the neck lies across the whole width of the land here, a vast trackless swamp that no army can cross. There are no roads through it, and no ground firm enough to bear the weight of men and horses in numbers. There is only the causeway, the raised stone road that runs straight through the mire, and the causeway passes directly beneath the towers of Moat Cailin. An army marching north out of the south has no choice. It cannot go around, for the bog will swallow it. It must come up the causeway in a narrow column, with soft killing ground on either side, straight into the teeth of those 3 ruined towers. And even in ruin, the towers command the road. Archers in the standing towers can rain arrows down on a column that cannot spread out to escape them. The tumbled stones and drowned foundations turn the ground into a maze. Again and again across the long history of Westeros, southern kings have led their host north to conquer the north. And again, they have broken themselves against this rotting stronghold in the swamp. The maesters record that Moat Cailin has never been taken from the south by storm. Not once, in all the thousands of years men have been trying. Moat Cailin is the location that closes out the whole northern half of the journey. The north does not end at a grand gate or a shining wall. It ends at a half-drowned ruin in a bog. 3 broken towers standing in black water. A place that looks dead and is in truth the deadliest ground in the kingdom. There is a fitness to that. The whole north, from the wall down to this swamp, is a country that has spent its entire existence defining itself against the south, keeping the south out, holding to its own gods and its own customs, distrusting the warm, rich lands below. And here at its southern edge, that instinct is made into stone. A country that begins with a wall of ice, ends with ruined towers sunk in a swamp. Beyond the towers, the causeway runs on thin and straight, into the reeds and the mist and the standing water. The firm ground of the north is behind you now. Ahead lies the neck itself, the narrowest, wettest, strangest country in all of Westeros, and the people who live in it are stranger still. The causeway is the only way through, and once you are on it, you understand quickly why. On either side, the land is not land at all. It is water and mud and reed, a green, wet country that has no edges and no solid footing, stretching away in every direction until it fades into mist. The road runs on its raised stone bank, narrow enough that 2 carts can barely pass, and it winds. It does not run straight, because straight ground does not exist here. It bends where the firm earth bends beneath it, snaking through the mire. And a traveller on it feels less like a man crossing a country than a man walking a single thin rope stretched across a swamp. That swamp would swallow him the moment he stepped off it. The neck is the narrowest part of all Westeros, the thin waist of the continent, where the land pinches almost to nothing between 2 seas. There is no other country like it in the realm. The air is thick and warm and damp, warmer than the north you have left, and it hangs heavy in the lungs. It smells of rot and black water and green growing things, and it never quite clears. Clouds of insects rise off the still pools at dusk in humming grey columns, and they do not spare a traveller. Everywhere the eye goes there is water, black, brown, glassy, still, and out of it grow the reeds and the drowned trees and the endless tangled green, so dense in places that you cannot see 10 feet past the edge of the road. The neck is beautiful in its strange way, but it is not kind, and it kills the unwary. The bog breeds sickness. Fevers and agues rise off the standing water, and a southern man who drinks the wrong pool or sleeps too long in the damp can burn with fever for days. Worse than the sickness are the lizard lions. These are the great beasts of the swamp, long, dark, armoured things that lie half sunk in the black water like fallen logs, so still that a man might walk within a stride of one and never know it was there. They are old and patient and enormous, and they take what comes to the water's edge. A hound, a horse, a careless man. A traveller learns to watch the logs in the water and to see which of them have eyes. The true masters of the neck are not the beasts. They are the Crannogmen, and they are unlike any other people in Westeros. They are Smallfolk, slight and lean, with flat features and green or grey eyes, and the southern lords have long looked down on them and called them mudmen and frog-eaters and worse. They live scattered across the bog in a way no other people live anywhere. They build their villages on crannogs, floating islands of woven reed and packed earth that sit atop the water and can be poled from place to place, so that a village here is not fixed to any one spot. They hunt with nets and frog spears and poison. They move by flat-bottomed boat through channels only they can read, and they know the swamp the way a man knows his own house in the dark. To a stranger, the neck is a trackless green maze that kills. To a crannog man, it is home, and every reed of it is familiar. You will not see many of them, and that is the point. The crannog men are a watchful, secret people. They do not come out to line the causeway and stare at travellers passing through. They stay back in the reeds, unseen, and they watch. And a man crossing the neck comes slowly to understand that he is never truly alone, that eyes he cannot find are on him from the moment he enters the bog to the moment he leaves it. Nothing moves on the causeway without the crannogman knowing. This is not menace, for the most part. It is simply the nature of the place and the people. But it means that the neck, for all its silence, is one of the most closely guarded countries in the realm. The lords of this drowned land are House Reed, and their seat is the strangest castle in Westeros, Greywater Watch. It sits somewhere in the heart of the bog, and no one can say exactly where, because it does not stay in one place. Greywater Watch is built upon a great crannog, and like the villages of the Smallfolk, it floats and it moves, drifting with the water through the swamp, so that a map cannot mark it, and an enemy cannot march on it. Ravens sent to Greywater Watch have been known to fly out again, with the message undelivered, unable to find a castle that has quietened its lights and drifted off into the mist. No hostile army has ever taken it, because no hostile army has ever found it. The Reeds are old and loyal bannermen of the Starks, sworn to Winterfell through all the long centuries, and they hold the southern door of the north through water and secrecy and the patience of a people who simply cannot be caught. The neck teaches a lesson worth carrying south. The north's greatest defences are not really its castles at all. Moat Cailin is a ruin. Greywater Watch cannot even be located, and yet no army has ever conquered the north by land, and the reason lies in this bog and the people who live in it. An invading host that survives Moat Cailin still has to cross the neck, and the neck fights back. With fever, with lizard lions, with sucking mud that drowns a column and swallows its baggage. Above all, it fights back with the crannogmen, who know every channel and pool, who strike from the reeds with poisoned spears and vanish before a blow can be returned, and who then melt back into a swamp no southern soldier can follow them into. Armies that came north to conquer have died in this bog by the thousand, ground down by the slow, patient hostility of the land and its watchers. The realm's true walls, in places like this, are not walls of stone. They are its people. And so, a traveller picks his way south along the winding causeway, day after damp day, through the reeds and the black water and the humming insects and the silent unseen eyes. And the neck goes on far longer than it seems it should for the narrowest part of a continent. The mist wraps the mornings. The lizard lions drift in the shallows. Somewhere out in the green, a floating castle keeps its own counsel and moves when it pleases. Then, at last, the ground begins to firm beneath the road. The pools grow smaller and fewer. The reeds thin. The drowned trees give way to living ones, and the causeway sinks back down and becomes an ordinary road running on ordinary earth. The heavy, wet smell of the bog fades behind you, and the air grows lighter and turns green with the smell of grass and growing crops. You have crossed the neck. The strange, watchful swamp is at your back, and with it the whole of the north. The ice and the pines, the grey castle and the barrows, the cold and the long memory. Ahead the land opens soft and rich and full of rivers, and the road begins, for the first time in 1,000 leagues, to fill with people. The change is not gradual once you are truly clear of the neck. Within a day, the world has become a different thing entirely. The land rolls now instead of lying flat and drowned. It rises into low green hills and falls into shallow valleys, and everywhere it is soft, watered, and alive. Grass grows thick to the edge of the road. Hedgerows divide the fields. Orchards stand in ordered rows on the hillsides, and the fields between them are worked and green and full. Wheat and barley bending in the wind, where the north had only heather and stone. After the cold and the swamp, the sheer easy richness of this country is almost startling. The land here wants to grow things, and it does. This is the Riverlands, the broad green heart of Westeros, and its whole character is written in its name. Water runs through everything. The great river of the region is the Trident, and it is 3 rivers: the Red Fork, the Blue Fork, and the Green Fork, which come down out of the hills and the highlands and wind together across the country before joining and running east to the sea. Between and around them run 100 lesser streams and brooks and tributaries, so that a traveller in the Riverlands is never far from the sound of moving water. You cross it again and again. Fords, ferries, stone bridges, wooden bridges, plank crossings over the small streams. The road is stitched together by them. The land is so laced with water that no one here can go anywhere without crossing a river, and that single fact shapes everything about the place. Because the land is rich and the water is everywhere, people live here in numbers the north never showed you. That abundance of people is what strikes a traveller first and hardest. The road has company now. Where the King's Road in the north might run empty for a day between one holdfast and the next, here it is busy from morning to dusk. Farmers drive carts of grain and turnips to market. Drovers push herds of cattle and flocks of geese along the verge. Merchants' wagons creak south under canvas. Pilgrims walk in loose bands, septons among them. Peddlers, tinkers, hedge knights, men-at-arms on some lord's errand, singers, beggars, whole families moving from one place to another. All of it flows along the same roads, and it does not stop. After 1,000 leagues of near silence, the noise of ordinary human traffic is a kind of shock. The country is dotted with mills. Wherever a stream runs with enough force, someone has built a water wheel, and the slow turning groan of the mill is one of the common sounds of the Riverlands, along with the ring of the smith and the bells of the many small septs. For the faith of the south rules here, the 7, not the old gods, and the villages have their 7-sided septs, where the north had only heart trees. Market towns sit at the crossings and the fords, small places with an inn and a market square and a cluster of houses, and on market days they fill with people from the surrounding farms come to buy and sell and hear the news. Everything about the region speaks of a settled, worked, populous land, tamed and tilled for a very long time. And yet this same soft country carries a hard truth beneath its green skin. The Riverlands lie in the middle of everything, and that has always been their curse. They have no natural walls. The mountains that shield the Vale, the swamp that shields the north, the deserts and seas that guard other kingdoms. The Riverlands have none of these. They are open on every side, hemmed by stronger neighbours, and so, through all the long history of Westeros, this has been the ground where wars are fought. Armies march across it, because it lies between everywhere and everywhere else. The rich fields are burned, the mills broken, the towns sacked, and then the survivors rebuild, because the land is too good to abandon, and wait for the next war to come. The Riverlands are the most fought-over country in the realm, because they are the most worth having. Their richness draws the sword to them. That contradiction sits at the centre of the place. It is the most crowded, most fertile, most trafficked land you have crossed, and also the most contested, the one that has never truly known peace. The north was empty but safe. The Riverlands are full, but always in danger. A traveller feels both things at once, the abundance on every hillside, and the memory of burning in the way an old woman watches the road, or in a village rebuilt too new beside the black timbers of the one that stood before it. The great house of this country is House Tully, and their seat tells you exactly how the Riverlands live. River Run sits where two of the forks come together, a strong stone castle raised in the fork of the land where the tumblestone runs into the red fork of the Trident. Two of its three sides are guarded by the rivers themselves. The third faces a great ditch, and in time of danger, the Tullys can open their sluice gates and let the rivers flood that ditch. So that River Run becomes an island, cut off by water on every side, unassailable so long as the food holds. It is a castle built by people who understood that in this land, water is both the source of all wealth and the surest wall. The Tully sigil is a leaping trout, silver and red, a fish of the rivers that made them, and their words are three plain ones: family, duty, honour. Of the great houses of the realm, few sets of words are gentler, and it is fitting that they belong to the house that holds the soft green middle of the world. The Tullys are not the oldest kings of Westeros. They never ruled as kings at all, in the way the Starks and others did in the days before the dragons. They were raised up to lordship over the Riverlands by Aegon the Conqueror, set above the other river lords to hold a country that had always been too divided and too exposed to hold itself. That, too, is part of the region's nature. The Riverlands have rarely governed themselves, because they lie too open and too tempting, passed for centuries between the hands of stronger neighbours before the Tullys were given the task of keeping them. To rule the Riverlands is to rule a rich house with no locks on the doors. So the traveller comes down out of the north into a country that feels, after everything behind him, almost like a different world. Green where the north was grey, warm where it was cold, crowded where it was empty, loud with the ordinary business of many people living close together. The roads are full, the rivers turn the mills, the market towns bustle, the septs ring their bells, and the fields run gold and green to the horizon. This is the heart of Westeros, the fat and fertile middle that every power in the realm has wanted for as long as there have been powers to want it. And the road runs on through it, southward still, toward the crossings and the great inns, where all this traffic gathers and mingles, and where a traveller learns that in a land of rivers, the men who hold the bridges hold nearly everything. In a country stitched together by crossings, the places where the roads meet the rivers become the gathering points of everything. The traffic does not spread evenly across the land. It funnels. It pools at the fords and the bridges and the junctions, and there, wherever the flow of people is thickest, someone has built an inn to catch it. The Riverlands are full of inns. more of them than any country you have crossed, and after the long, empty stretches of the north, the sight of one is a small revelation. A lit window at dusk, a stable full of horses, smoke rising from a good chimney, and the sound of many voices behind the door. The greatest of them stands where 3 roads come together, and it is known simply as the inn at the crossroads. It has stood there in one form or another for a very long time, rebuilt and renamed across the generations, because the spot itself never loses its value. Here the King's Road running north and south meets the River Road that runs east toward the sea, and everyone who travels the eastern Riverlands passes through this one point sooner or later. That is the whole secret of the place. It does not need to be beautiful or famous. It only needs to sit where the roads cross, and the roads bring the world to its door. Inside the Crossroads Inn shows you the Riverlands in miniature. On any given night, the common room holds a mixture that no northern hall would ever contain. Merchants counting the day's takings, farmers who have sold their grain and are drinking the profit, hedge knights with dented armor and empty purses hoping for a lord to hire them, singers working the room for coppers, pilgrims bound for one holy place or another, wagoners, drovers, servants on errands, a septon or two, and always a few travellers whose business no one asks about. They eat together and drink together, and above all, they talk. The inn is where news changes hands. A man who wants to know what is happening in the realm does not go to a castle. He sits in a Crossroads inn for an evening and listens, and by morning he has heard rumours from 100 leagues in every direction, some of them even true. The food is plain and good and served hot, which after the road is enough. There is bread and cheese and stewed mutton, river fish fried in butter, ale brewed on the premises, and if the innkeeper is doing well, a joint of something turning on the spit. The smell of it reaches the yard before you reach the door. For the price of a few coins, a traveller gets a hot meal, a place by the fire, a bed of straw in the loft, and the company of everyone else the road has swept in that day. These inns are the warm, beating hubs of the region, and the Riverlands could not function without them. They are where the country meets itself. But an inn only asks for coin, and gives you food and shelter in return. Not every crossing in the Riverlands is so generous. Downstream, where the green fork of the Trident cuts across the King's Road, stands a place that has turned the simple fact of a river into a fortune. And its story tells you how power truly works in this land of water. The river there is wide and deep and dangerous, too broad to ford, too strong to swim, and for a long stretch in either direction, there is no good place to cross it. And so travellers on the King's Road were forced, for centuries, into a long and miserable detour, unless they could find a boat. Then, some 600 years ago, a family of river lords looked at that stretch of the Green Fork and saw a chance. They built a bridge, not a small one, a great stone span wide enough for wagons, strong enough to last, thrown across the whole width of the river, and on either bank they raised a castle to guard it. 2 squat, strong towers of grey stone, one on the western shore and one on the eastern, joined by the bridge itself, with a fortified gatehouse at the middle of the span. The place is called the Twins, for its 2 matching castles, and the family that built it is House Frey. The Freys did a very simple thing, and it made them rich beyond all their neighbours. They charge a toll. Anyone who wishes to cross the Green Fork by the only reliable bridge for many leagues must pay the Freys for the privilege, and pay they do, because the alternative is days of hard travel to find another way over. Wagons pay, horsemen pay, herds pay by the head, Armies, when they need to cross, must either pay a great deal or fight for it, and the twins were built to make fighting for it very hard indeed. 2 castles and a fortified bridge, each tower able to hold the crossing even if the other falls. Sitting astride a river no army can easily ford. For 6 centuries the Freys have sat there and taken their cut of everything that moves between the north and south of the Riverlands. This has made them one of the wealthiest houses in the region, and one of the least loved. The older, prouder families looked down on the Freys as up-jumped toll collectors who grew fat on other men's need to cross a river. There is truth in the scorn, but there is also envy in it, because the Freys have done something none of the prouder houses managed. They turned geography into gold. They understood, long before anyone else, that in a land defined by its rivers, the man who owns the crossing owns the road, and the road owns everyone who must travel it. The house that this bargain built is a strange and swarming thing. The Freys are famous, above all else, for their numbers. The old lord of the twins has outlived a string of wives and fathered a vast brood of children, and those children have had children, and those in turn have had more, until the household of the twins has become a great grasping tangle of sons and daughters, grandsons and granddaughters, cousins and half-cousins beyond any easy counting. The castle teems with them. They marry and multiply and scheme for position among themselves, each looking to his own advancement, and the whole sprawling clan shares a reputation for being careful, calculating and slow, to do anything that does not profit them. They are not a warm family. They are a counting house with battlements, endlessly reproducing, endlessly weighing what each thing is worth. And so, the twins teaches the traveller the hard lesson of this rich country. In the north, the land was open and free, and a man could ride 100 leagues without paying anyone for the right to pass. Here in the Riverlands, movement itself has a price. The rivers that make the land fertile also cut it into pieces, and at every crossing sits someone waiting to be paid. Power in this country is not measured only in swords and castles and fields. It is measured in bridges. The men who hold the crossings hold the road, and the road holds everyone. And the Freys, sitting on their 2 towers above the Green Fork, have understood that better and longer than anyone else in the realm. Stand on the King's Road anywhere in the eastern Riverlands. Turn your face away from the crossings and the tolls, and look toward the sunrise. There, along the whole eastern horizon, the land rises into a wall of stone, a range of peaks, grey and blue and white-capped, marching north to south as far as the eye can follow. These are the mountains of the moon, and behind them lies one of the great kingdoms of Westeros, a country you can see from the road but cannot easily reach. It is called the Vale of Arryn, and its whole character is written in those mountains. The Vale is a rich, sheltered, sunlit land, and it is sealed away behind a barrier of rock that has kept the wider world at arm's length for thousands of years. The road does not carry you into the Vale, and this is the first thing to understand about the place. To reach it, a traveller must leave the easy country behind and climb. There is one main way in from the west, a track that winds up out of the Riverlands and into the passes, and it is known simply as the High Road. It is not a kind road. It clings to the mountainsides, crosses cold rushing streams, and rises through thin air toward passes that stay snowed shut for much of the year. Even in summer it is a hard climb, and few travel it for pleasure. But the road has a second danger beyond the cold and the height, and that danger is people. The mountains of the moon are home to the mountain clans, and they are unlike anyone you have met on the journey so far. they are not Smallfolk in the ordinary sense. They own no fields, bend to no lord, and pay no taxes to the Arryns who claim the mountains as their own. They live in the high stone country as their ancestors did, in scattered bands with names like the Stone Crows and the Black Ears and the Burn Men. And they survive by taking what they need from those who pass through. To them, a traveller on the high road is a prize. They come down out of the rocks in the dark in numbers, and a party too small to defend itself may simply vanish in the passes and never be heard of again. The Arryns have hunted the clans for generations and never rooted them out, because the mountains are theirs in a way no lowland lord can match. This is why the high road is dangerous, and why only the well-armed or the well-guarded attempt it. For those who make the climb and survive it, the mountains eventually give way, and the road comes to a gate. Where the high road finally spills down toward the green heart of the Vale, it is blocked by a castle set squarely across the only path, and that castle is called the Bloody Gate. It is old and grim and perfectly placed, a wall of stone flung across a narrow pass with sheer rock on either side, so that no one may enter the Vale from the west without passing beneath it. The gate has stood for many centuries, and in all that time no army has ever forced its way through. The knights who hold it ask every traveller who they are and what business brings them, and only then is a stranger allowed to pass down into the country beyond. The name comes from all the would-be invaders who died in the pass trying to break through, and it is a fair warning. The Vale keeps its door shut and stained, and it has never had to open it against its will. Past the Bloody Gate, the land changes as suddenly as a held breath let go. The traveller comes down out of the cold grey stone into a wide green vale, warm and fertile and ringed on every side by mountains. Here the danger of the high road falls away, and the country opens into fields and orchards and clear rivers, dotted with the seats of the Vale's proud old houses. It is a sheltered place, protected by its walls of rock from the worst of the weather and from the wars of the outside world, and its people have a settled, unhurried air that comes from living behind such defences. The Knights of the Vale are famous throughout the realm, well armoured and well mounted, raised in a country that has rarely needed to use them against invaders because the mountains do so much of the work. At the far end of the Vale, one mountain stands taller than the rest, a great stone spire called the Giant's Lance, and near its foot a waterfall spills endlessly down the rock. High up on the shoulder of that mountain, so high that clouds drift below it, sits the seat of House Arryn. It is called the Eyrie, and it is the smallest of the great castles of Westeros and the strangest. It is a slender cluster of pale towers perched on a ledge of the mountain, reached only by a long climb up steps and ladders and swaying baskets hauled by chain and mule, past 3 way stations built into the rock along the way. In winter, the castle is cut off entirely, buried in snow and unreachable, and its household must come down to a stouter castle at the mountain's base and wait out the cold there. In summer, the Eyrie is a jewel above the world, small, white, warmed by the sun, quiet save for the wind and the falling water, with a view down the whole length of the Vale that no other castle in the realm can match. For all its beauty, the Eyrie has a hard edge, as such places always do. Its dungeons are famous and terrible in a way peculiar to the place. They are called the Sky Cells, and they are chambers cut into the outer wall of the castle with a side left open to the empty air. A prisoner in a Sky Cell is not chained. He is simply left in a room with no fourth wall and a floor that slopes gently outward toward a drop of many hundreds of feet, and the mountain and the fear do the rest. Some prisoners lose their nerve and step out into the sky of their own accord. And in the high hall of the eyrie itself, there is a smooth patch of white marble with a hinged door set into the floor, and beneath that door is nothing but the long fall down the mountain. It is called the Moon Door, and by the old custom of the Vale, justice is sometimes done by opening it. A land this high needs no headsman. It has the drop. The Arryns who rule from this eagle's perch are among the oldest and proudest of the great houses, descended from the kings of Mountain and Vale, who ruled here before the dragons came. Their sigil is a white falcon on a field of sky blue, crowned by a white moon, and their words speak of their pride, as high as honor. Everything about them and their country says the same thing. They sit above the realm, walled off from it, watching the wars and troubles of the lowlands play out far below, while the mountains keep their own peace intact. And that is the lesson the Vale teaches to anyone looking east from the road. In this country, geography decides your fate. The Riverlands, open and crossed by every army, must bleed in every war. The Vale, sealed behind its mountains and its bloody gate, can simply close its door and watch. Two neighbours, one long ridge of stone between them, and that stone decides which one must fight and which one gets to look on from above. Turn your face back to the road then, and away from the mountains, and set your feet south again. The Vale keeps its distance behind you, and the King's Road carries on through the last of the Riverlands, past the final crossings and the last of the market towns, and after a time the country begins to change once more. It is a gentler change than any you have felt so far. There is no wall of stone to mark it, no swamp, no barrow field, no river to ford. The land simply softens beneath you by degrees, and one morning you realize the north is truly gone from the air. The first thing you notice is the warmth. The chill that has followed the traveller down from the wall, thinned but never quite banished through the river country, finally lets go. The sun sits higher and holds longer. The wind loses its edge. The soil underfoot grows richer and darker, and the fields to either side of the road are worked close and tended well, hedged and ditched, and dotted with the smoke of many chimneys. This is the Crownlands, the country the Targaryens carved out for themselves around the mouth of the Blackwater when they took the realm, and it has the settled, prosperous look of land that has been farmed hard and lived in thickly for a very long time. Off to the south and west, the ground rises into a great sweep of forest, older and darker than the tended woods along the road. This is the Kingswood, a vast tract of oak and elm and pine that runs down toward the southern coast, and it has belonged to the crown since the conquest. Kings have hunted here for 300 years, chasing boar and deer and, in the old days, worse things through its deep green shade. The road does not go into it, but the traveller can see it lying off across the country like a dark tide, and can feel how much wild land still survives even this close to the heart of the realm. But the deepest change is in the number of people on the road. In the north, a traveller might walk for a day and meet no one but a single crofter driving a handful of sheep. In the Riverlands, the road grew busier, thick with carters and peddlers and pilgrims moving between the market towns. Here, as the capital draws near, the road grows crowded in a way that nothing on the whole journey has prepared you for. It becomes a river of its own, running one way toward the city. The traffic thickens by the mile. There are farmers driving carts piled with turnips and cabbages and squawking fowl, bound for the city markets. There are drovers pushing herds of cattle and pigs and long lines of geese, all of them walking to their deaths in the capital's kitchens. There are wagons of ale and wine and timber, strings of pack mules under bulging loads, and merchants riding beside their goods with hired swords at their sides. There are pilgrims on foot, bound for the great sept, and singers and mummers and beggars drifting toward the one place large enough to feed them all. Now and then, a party of horsemen forces its way through the press, and the common folk step aside to let them pass. The road has become a place of constant movement, dust rising from 1,000 feet and hooves, and it never seems to empty. Among the crowds, you begin to see men in gold cloaks. These are the city watch of King's Landing, the men charged with keeping order, and their reach extends out along the roads that feed the capital. Armed men in ringmail and long golden cloaks, carrying spears or clubs or short swords, they watch the traffic with the flat, unhurried eyes of men who have seen every kind of trouble come down the road toward their gates. Their presence is the first real sign that you are entering the ground the crown holds close. Out here, the king's peace is kept by his own men, and it is kept with a heavy hand. Then there is a smell that returns to the traveller, faint at first, carried on the warm wind from the east. It is the sea, the Blackwater rush, the broad river that gives the capital its harbour, runs down through this country to the sea, and the salt of it drifts inland to meet the road. It is a clean smell, and for a little while it is a welcome one, mingling with the dust and the dung and the green of the fields. It will not stay clean for long. As the city nears, the sea smell begins to gather other things into itself. The reek of smoke and tanneries, and too many people packed into too little space, until it becomes something no one who has smelled it ever forgets. But that comes later. For now, it is only the sea, telling the traveller that the road is nearly run. And at last, from a rise in the road on a clear day, you see it. Far ahead, where the land bends down toward the water, the country lifts into 3 great hills, and the hills are covered from foot to crown in a grey and brown crust of buildings, pressed so close together that from a distance they seem a single vast stain spread across the ground. Smoke hangs over the whole of it in a permanent haze, the smoke of 10,000 cooking fires and forges and hearths, so that the city seems to smoke like a banked fire even in the middle of the day. On the tallest of the hills, pale stone catches the light, and here and there a tower or a great dome stands up above the general sprawl. Beyond it all, past the far edge of the buildings, there is a wide, flat gleam that is the sea, crowded with the small dark shapes of ships. This is King's Landing, the seat of the Iron Throne, and the largest city in all of Westeros, and after 1,000 leagues of open road, it sits on the horizon, like the end of the world. It is a strange thing to feel, that first sight. The city is still a long way off, hours of walking yet, and already it dominates everything. The road you stand on, the fields around you, the traffic pressing at your back, the smoke on the horizon, the smell on the wind, the very gold cloaks watching the crowd, all of it points the same way. All of it flows toward that grey stain on the hills. This is the lesson the last stretch of road teaches before the walls even come into view. You feel the capital long before you can see its stones. The country here does not merely lead to the city. It feeds it. Everything the road carries, the grain and the cattle and the timber and the wine and the pilgrims and the swords, is being drawn in one direction, toward one hungry place that eats it all and never fills. The North took nothing and asked for little. This is the opposite end of the realm entirely, and you can taste it on the wind before you ever reach the gates. The last miles are the slowest. The road that carried the traveller south for 1,000 leagues now moves at the pace of the slowest cart on it, and there is no going around, for the press is too thick. You are not walking to the city anymore. You are being carried into it, one shuffling step at a time, shoulder to shoulder with drovers and pilgrims and peddlers, all funneled toward the same narrow point where the walls open to let the road through. And the walls, when you finally come under them, are high. Not the black immensity of the wall. Nothing on the world will ever match that again, but high and thick and made of pale stone, running away to either side around the base of the hills. There are 7 gates in all, great iron-bound wooden gates set in towers, and each one takes a road and swallows it. The traveller comes in through whichever gate the King's Road feeds, and the moment you pass beneath the arch, the country you have walked through for so long is simply gone, cut off behind you as though it had never been. What replaces it is noise. That is the first thing, before the smell, before the sight of anything. The sound of 500,000 people living packed together hits you like a wall. 1,000 sounds layer on top of each other and never stop, day or night. Hawkers crying their wares, cartwheels grinding on stone, hammers on iron, dogs, gulls, children, the bawling of penned animals, the shouting of men, the endless shuffle and murmur of a crowd that never thins. After the long silences of the north, where a traveller could walk a whole day and hear nothing but wind and his own feet, the city comes down on the ears like a physical thing, and it doesn't let up. Then comes the smell, and the smell is worse. The clean sea scent that drifted out to meet you on the road is gone, drowned in the reek of the city itself. It is the smell of too many people and animals living too close, of dung in the streets and offal in the gutters, of smoke and tanneries and fish left too long in the sun, of privies and pigsties and rot, all of it baking together in the southern heat. King's Landing is famous for its stink, and the fame is earned. Men who live there stop noticing it. The traveller down from the cold, clean north will notice it for days and will carry the memory of it long after. Inside the gates, the streets climb and twist. There are broad avenues where the great and the rich ride, and there are alleys so narrow a laden mule can barely pass, and the buildings lean out over them until the sky is a thin grey ribbon far overhead. Everything is crowded onto the 3 hills and the low ground between them, and everything is built on top of something older. The city has burned and been rebuilt more than once, and it shows timber piled on stone piled on the bones of what stood before. The markets are the heart of the daily life. In the great squares, the goods of the whole realm are laid out for sale, and much of what the traveller saw moving down the road ends here, on a stall or a hook or a butcher's block. There is grain from the reach and salt fish from the coast, wine and oil and spices carried across the narrow sea, cloth and leather and iron, fowl and fruit and vegetables piled in bright heaps. There are cut-purses working the crowds, and beggars at the edges of them, and the smell of cooking rising from 100 fires. A man with coin in his purse can buy almost anything in the markets of King's Landing. A man without it can only stand and look. The poorest of the city live at the bottom, in the low ground by the water, in a district men call Flea Bottom. It is the oldest and meanest part of the city, a warren of tenements and alleys packed so tight that the sun barely reaches the ground, and the air there hangs thick with the smoke of the potshops. These are the kitchens of the poor, where great cauldrons of what they call a bowl of brown are kept simmering day and night, thickened with whatever meat can be had, and no questions asked about what kind. The people of Flea Bottom are born there and die there in numbers, and the district breeds them faster than the city can kill them. If the Red Keep on its hill is the top of King's Landing, Flea Bottom is the bottom in every sense, and the two ends of the city are as far apart as the two ends of the realm. Higher up, the streets have their trades, each to its own. The most famous of them climbs one of the hills and is called the Street of Steel. This is where the armourers and the smiths have their forges, the humblest at the bottom of the hill and the finest at the top, so that a man rises through the ranks of his craft by rising up the street itself. At the crest are the master armourers, whose plate and blades are bought by lords and knights, and whose work is as much art as war. All day the Street of Steel rings with hammers, and the glow of the forges lights it after dark. The traveller who has watched northern smiths work rough iron by a single fire will find here a whole hillside given over to the making of arms. Above the noise and the smoke, on one of the hills, stands the greatest building in the city that is not a fortress. It is the great sept of Baelor, the holy heart of the faith of the Seven, a vast structure of white marble crowned with 7 crystal towers and a great dome that can be seen from far out on the water. Named for a pious king of old, it is where the High Septon keeps his seat, where the great and the noble come to pray, and where the bells hang that ring out over the whole city to mark the passing of the day and the deaths of kings. The faith the traveller barely met in the north, where the old gods still rule the weirwoods, here fills a marble hall large enough to hold thousands, and the sound of its bells carries over everything. Through all of it move the gold cloaks, thicker here than on the roads outside, for keeping order in a city of 500,000 is a task that never ends. They walk the markets and the gates and the great squares, breaking up brawls, dragging off thieves, moving the crowds along. The city they keep is too big and too poor and too hungry to ever be truly at peace, and they know it. They keep it the only way it can be kept, with clubs and spears and a hard indifference to the daily misery around them. And so the traveller stands at last in the middle of the largest city in Westeros and feels the full weight of the thing. This is what the whole long road was for. Every empty mile of the gift, every silent stretch of the Wolfswood, every green field of the Riverlands, and every laden cart on the King's Road, all of it was flowing here, to this crush of stone and smoke and 500,000 souls packed onto 3 hills above the sea. After the vast open quiet of the north, the capital does not welcome you. It engulfs you. It comes down on every sense at once, the noise and the stink and the press of bodies, and there is nowhere in it to be alone. This is the human heart of the realm, the place all that empty land was pouring itself into, and standing inside its walls at last, you understand the true measure of the country only now. The north had room for a man to be small and quiet. King's Landing has room for nothing but more of itself. There is one climb left. Of the 3 hills the city is built upon, the tallest is called Eggon's High Hill, and it is crowned by the seat of kings. To reach it, you leave the crush of the markets behind and climb up out of the noise, and with every street the crowds thin a little and the buildings grow grander, until the road runs up to the walls of a fortress that looks down over everything below. This is the Red Keep, and it is well named. Its walls and towers are built of pale red stone, so that at dawn and dusk they seem to catch fire, glowing warm above a city of grey and brown. It was raised by the first of the Dragon Kings on the hill, where he first planted his standard, and it has been the heart of royal power ever since. Massive drum towers, curtain walls thick enough to shrug off any siege, a dry moat lined with iron spikes, great gates guarded day and night. After 1,000 leagues of open road, you stand before the strongest walls in the south, and they were built to keep men exactly like him outside. Within the walls, the keep is a small city of its own. There are yards and stables and barracks, kitchens and smithies and storehouses, a sept and a godswood, gardens where the court walks, and towers where the maesters keep their ravens. The most famous of the towers is the one they call the Tower of the Hand, where the king's chief servant keeps his rooms and does the work of ruling that the king himself would rather not. At the centre of it stands a squat, formidable stronghold, a castle within the castle, ringed by its own dry moat and reached by a single drawbridge. This is Maegor's Holdfast, built by a cruel king of old as a last refuge, a place where the royal family can lock themselves away behind their own walls if the outer castle should ever fall. The men who built the Red Keep did not trust the world, and they did not always trust each other, and the stone remembers it. The history of the place is not gentle. It was raised by conquerors, and men have died in it in every way a man can die. Kings have been made and murdered here. One of them, mad at the end, burned men alive in the throne room itself and died on the floor of it with his own guard's blade in his back. The stones have soaked up centuries of scheming and treachery and blood, and even a traveller who knows none of the stories can feel the weight of them. The sense of a place where power has always been held by whoever was willing to do the worst things to keep it. The Red Keep is beautiful in the evening light. It is not a kind place, but you have not climbed all this way for the walls. At the heart of the keep stands the throne room, a long and cavernous hall, and at the end of it stands the thing the whole road has been leading toward. The hall itself is built to make a man feel small. It runs long and high and narrow, lit by tall windows, hung with the banners of the great houses, and at the far end, raised up on a broad stone stair, sits the seat of the kings of Westeros. The Iron Throne is not a chair a man would choose to sit in. It is a monstrous, twisted thing, tall as a small tower, a jagged tangle of blades and points. It was forged, the story goes, from the swords of the conquered, 1,000 blades surrendered by the kings the first Dragon King defeated, heated and hammered and fused together in the fire of a living dragon. The metal was never smoothed. The throne bristles with barbs and edges and the broken stubs of old weapons, and it is so large and so cruel in its making that no man can sit it in comfort or safety. A king who leans back the wrong way, who lets his attention slip, can cut himself on the seat of his own power. There is an old saying about it, that the throne is ever unkind to those who are not meant to sit it, and men who have watched kings rule from it have taken the saying to heart. That is the whole meaning of the thing, built into iron. The first king made it deliberately hard and ugly and dangerous, so that no one who sat it would ever grow easy, so that ruling would always feel like the sharp and perilous business it truly is. It is not a seat of comfort. It is a seat of blades, and every king who has ever held the realm has held it from that pile of melted swords, and been reminded every time he sat of exactly what his crown was made of. From the uncomfortable, fierce throne, a king looks down the length of the hall at whoever has come to kneel or beg or bargain, and beyond the walls, from the windows and the towers of the keep, the whole of King's Landing falls away below. The 3 hills, the tangle of streets, the smoke of the potshops, the marble dome of the great sept of Vale, rising white above it all. Below that, at the foot of the city, the great harbour opens onto the water, crowded with the masts of ships from every port on the narrow sea. And beyond the harbour, the Blackwater rush pours out into the bay. And beyond that lies the open sea and the whole wide world. From the highest window of the Red Keep, a man can see the 500,000 souls beneath him reduced to a murmur and a haze of smoke. Small enough to hold in the eye all at once, small enough to forget a people at all. And this is where the road ends. You set out beneath 700 feet of black ice, at the cold and empty top of the world. You have walked over half of Westeros and come at last to a chair of swords. The two ends of the country stand mirrored against each other, and the likeness is worth holding in the mind. At the top there is the wall, a vast thing of ice raised by men long dead, cold and hard and cutting, holding back the empty dark for a promise almost everyone has forgotten. At the bottom there is the throne, a vast thing of iron raised by a conqueror, cold and hard and cutting, drawing every ambition in the realm toward itself. One was built to keep something out. The other was built to hold everything in. Both were made deliberately harsh, so that the men who kept them would never mistake the work for something soft. The wall is honest about what it is. It asks men to freeze and die at the edge of the world, and promises them nothing but the cold. The throne offers no such honesty. It glitters at the end of a marble hall, and men spend their whole lives and the lives of thousands of others clawing toward it, and when they reach it, they find a heap of old blades that will cut them if they lean the wrong way. A throne is only iron, and iron does not rule. The men and women who move through the halls of the Red Keep do that, and to understand the capital, you must look past the stone to the living court that fills it. It is a crowded, perfumed, watchful place, and it does not work the way a northern hall works at all. At the top of it, by right of crown, sits the king. Robert Baratheon won the realm in war, a huge and famous warrior who broke the last Dragon King's cause on the battlefield and took the throne with a war hammer in his hands. But the man who fought for the crown has little patience for the wearing of it. He is loud and vast and going soft, fond of wine and feasts and hunting, and he spends as much of his reign as he can away from the tedious business of ruling. He would rather chase a boar through the Kingswood than sit in judgment in his own hall. The throne is his, and he is bored by it, and everyone at court knows it, and this shapes everything. A king who does not wish to rule leaves a great deal of ruling to be picked up by other hands. Beside him, and against him in every way that matters, is the Queen. Cersei of House Lannister was married to Robert, to bind the richest house in the realm to the new king, and there is no warmth left in the match, if there ever was any. She is beautiful and proud and clever, and she watches the court with a cold and constant attention that her husband never bothers to spend. Behind her stands her family, the Lannisters of Casterly Rock, whose gold pays the crown's debts and whose ambition fills the spaces the king leaves empty. A traveller at court soon learns that the marriage at the top of the realm is a quiet war, and that half the room takes the queen's side while pretending to take the king's. The real work of governing falls to a handful of men who sit on the king's small council, and these are the faces you would come to know if you lingered. They are the ones who keep the realm running while the king hunts. There is the master of coin, Peter Baelish, a small smiling man of modest birth, who has climbed higher than his blood should ever have carried him. Men call him Littlefinger, half in mockery, and he wears the name as though it costs him nothing. He handles the crown's money, and he is very good at it, conjuring gold out of debt and trade and the 1,000 small businesses of the city. And no one is quite certain where all of it goes. He is pleasant to everyone and loyal to no one that anyone can find. And behind the easy smile, there is a mind always 3 steps ahead of the conversation. There is the master of whisperers, a soft eunuch called Varys, who comes from across the narrow sea. He has no lands, no house, no sword, and no family, and he is one of the most dangerous men in the realm. He keeps a web of informants that reaches into every corner of the city and far beyond it, children and servants and beggars, whom men call his little birds. And there is very little said in King's Landing that does not eventually reach his ears. He glides through the halls in soft slippers, powdered and perfumed and smiling, professing his devotion to the good of the realm. And no one trusts a word of it, and no one can do without him. There is the Grand Maester, an old man named Pycelle, grey and slow and heavy with the great chain of his order, who has served king after king, and speaks always of his own long loyalty. He gives counsel in a trembling, doddering voice, and some at court take him for a spent old fool. Whether the feebleness is entirely real is another of the small uncertainties the capital breeds. And there is one seat on the council that sits empty. The office of Master of Ships, who commands the crown's fleets, belongs by rights to the king's own brother, Stannis Baratheon. But Stannis has withdrawn from the court entirely, gone off to brood on the grim island fortress of Dragonstone out in the bay, and his chair at the table stays vacant. You count the faces at the council and find a gap among them, and the gap says something. Even the king's own blood would rather sit alone on a rock in the sea than remain in this room. Around and behind these few stand the rest of the court. There are the 7 knights of the King's Guard, sworn to guard the king with their lives, cloaked and armoured all in white, standing silent at the foot of the throne and at every door that matters. There are the high-born ladies and their maids, the household knights, the envoys and petitioners, the singers who play for coin and favour in the halls, the servants who move everywhere and are noticed by no one and hear everything. The air is thick with perfume, sandalwood and rosewater and scented oils, laid on heavily to cover the reek of the city that seeps in even here. The clothes are bright silk and cloth of gold. The manners are polished. The smiles come easily. And beneath all of it runs a current of watching and listening and calculation that never stops. What strikes you most, coming down the long road from the north, is this. He would remember the halls of Winterfell, where a lord said what he meant, and a guest was fed and sheltered and told the plain truth, where honour and duty were spoken of as simple things, because the people there believed they were simple. The capital is nothing like that. Here almost no one says quite what they mean. A courtier will praise a man to his face and undo him by nightfall. A kindness is often a move in a game. A gift is often a debt, and a friendly word may be a knife held out handle first. The whole court speaks in a second language laid over the first, a language of implication and flattery and quiet threat. And a man who takes every word at its plain meaning will not last a season. The sound of the place is different too. A northern hall is loud in an honest way, full of laughter and argument and the clatter of the yard. The Red Keep is quieter and far more dangerous. Its true business is done in low voices, in shuttered rooms, in the pauses between polite sentences. The most important things said at this court are never said aloud at all. And this is the last lesson the road has to teach, waiting at the bottom of the country. You came south through a realm that grew warmer and richer and more crowded with every league. And it ends here, in the one place where the plainness of the north has been left entirely behind. In the cold country, a man feared the wind and the white and the failing harvest. In the warm heart of the realm, he must fear the smiling man beside him. The wall was honest about what it was. The court is honest about nothing. At the top of Westeros, words mean what they say. At the bottom, in the perfumed hush of the Red Keep, words are the most dangerous weapons anyone carries, and a knife is only what men reach for when the words have failed. Stand in the Red Keep long enough, and it begins to feel like the whole world, a place complete in itself, needing nothing beyond its own walls. But it is not the whole world. It is one end of a thread, and the thread runs 1,000 leagues north to a wall of ice, and everything that ties the top of the country to the bottom moves along that single spine of road you have just walked. It helps to turn and look back up it now, at the length of it all at once. One road, running the full height of the realm. The King's Road begins at the gates of King's Landing, and does not truly end until it reaches Castle Black, and everything between the two, the Crownlands, the Riverlands, the Neck, the whole vast north, is strung along it like beads on a cord. A rider who set out from the wall and never turned aside would come, in the end, to the foot of the Iron Throne. And every place in this story sits somewhere on that line between. Things move along it constantly, in both directions, and what moves tells you a great deal about the realm. Fastest of all is news, and news does not travel by road at all. It travels by raven. Every castle of any size keeps a maester, and every maester keeps a rookery, and the blackbirds carry small sealed messages from tower to tower, far faster than any horse. A word spoken at Winterfell can reach King's Landing in days, rather than the weeks a rider would need. This is the realm's nervous system, thin and fragile and easily broken, but astonishingly quick. When something important happens at one end of the country, the other end can know of it before the roads have even heard. The ravens are how a kingdom this large holds together at all. Slower and heavier comes everything that must be carried. Grain moves along the road, and salt and cloth and timber and iron and wine and all the goods of trade, on carts and barges and the backs of mules. Rivers do much of the work in the middle of the realm, the trident and its forks carrying cargo that no cart could haul. Ships do the rest along the coasts, into the harbour at King's Landing and out again. The great markets of the south are fed by all of it, and the road and the river and the sea together are what keep 500,000 people in one city from starving. And when the realm goes to war, armies move along this same spine. The lords call their banners, and the men gather, and they march the roads their grandfathers marched. An army moving is a slow and hungry thing, eating the countryside as it goes, and the same causeway that a single traveller crosses in fear the crannogman will notice him is the only door a whole host can use to enter or leave the north. The road that carries a peddler's cart in peace carries 10,000 spears in war. It has done both many times, but the most telling thing about the road is how much moves along it in one direction only. Look at what flows north, up toward the cold end, and it is a thin trickle. Recruits for the night's watch mostly, the criminals and the exiles and the younger sons, sent up the road under guard or walking it alone, a handful at a time, fewer every year. The occasional lord or messenger on the crown's business. Some trade goods for the northern holdfasts, wine and steel and small luxuries the cold country cannot make for itself. That is nearly all. The north takes little from the south, and the south sends little to the north, and the wall at the very top receives least of anything. The realm's oldest promise is kept, when it is kept at all, on the leavings of everyone else. Now look at what flows south, and it is a flood. grain and taxes and rents, the wealth of the land pulled downhill toward the capital and the crown. Ambition flows south too, and this is the truest current of all. A younger son with a sword and no lands does not ride north to the wall if he can help it. He rides south to the court, to the tourneys, to the places where a man can rise. Every road in Westeros in the end seems to lean toward King's Landing, and every man with something to gain feels the pull of it. The heat of the realm, its money and its power and its hunger, gathers at the bottom of the map. The top is left to hold itself. Set the two ends side by side plainly, and the contrast is the whole shape of the country. At the top there is silence. A wall of ice under a grey sky. A few hundred men in black holding a border that most of the realm has forgotten exists. Empty land below them going quietly back to wilderness. The cold is honest, and the danger is honest, and hardly anyone is watching. It is the oldest thing in Westeros, and the most ignored. At the bottom, there is the roar. 500,000 people packed onto 3 hills, the reek of the city and the perfume laid over it, the markets and the docks and the whispering court, the throne of melted swords, and everyone who matters in the realm crowded around it, watching each other, reaching for more. It is loud and rich and dangerous, and everyone is watching everything. And between the two runs the long thread of land you have crossed on foot, the empty gift, the dark Wolfswood, the warm halls of Winterfell, the haunted Barrowlands, the drowned neck, the green and crowded Riverlands, the Vale walled off to the east, the fattening country of the Crownlands, and at last the gates of the city itself. One country joined by one road, carrying ravens and grain and armies and ambition up and down its length. But the joining is uneven, and that is the thing worth seeing. The road runs both ways, yet almost everything of value travels in one direction. The warmth and the wealth and the attention of the realm all pour toward the south, toward the throne. And the cold north at the far end of the line is left largely to itself, kept alive on the little that trickles back up. A kingdom this size cannot help but have a rich end and a poor end, a loud end and a quiet one. What the road makes plain is which end Westeros has chosen to care about. The men in black at the top of the map guard the oldest border in the realm against the thing the rest of the country has stopped believing in. The men in silk at the bottom of the map guard nothing but their own places at the table. And the road ties them together whether they like it or not, so that a raven from the wall can land in King's Landing in a matter of days and be read and be set aside and be forgotten before the ink has dried. The thread holds. The country is one country, but it leans, all of it, toward the warm south and turns its back on the cold north standing watch behind it. Set the whole walk behind you now and hold it in the mind all at once, as a country crossed on foot, from the coldest stone at the top to the sharpest chair at the bottom. It began at a wall of ice. 700 feet of it, blue-white and sweating in the sun, standing across the top of the world with nothing behind it but the haunted forest and the empty white. A few hundred men in black held it, living hard and plain on the realm's oldest promise, and the first thing the road taught was how few of them were left to keep it. That was the northern pole of the journey, cold, honest, and largely forgotten. And it ended at a chair of blades. 1,000 swords melted into a black and jagged throne, tall and ugly and dangerous to sit, in a hall at the top of a hill above 500,000 souls. Around it crowded everyone in the realm who mattered, watching each other, reaching for more, speaking in words that never quite meant what they said. That was the southern pole, warm, rich, and watched by everyone. Two ends, one cut from ice, one forged from steel, and both of them cold in their own way. The wall would kill a careless man with weather. The throne would kill a careless man with a whisper. Between them ran everything else. Recall it in order, the way the feet remember it. South of the wall came the gift, the broad grant of land meant to feed the watch, quietly going back to grass. Abandoned holdfasts, empty fields, villages gone to wilderness, a whole realm returning to the wild for want of people to work it. Then the deep north proper, the Wolfswood dark with pine and sentinel, the snow, the thin scattered settlements, the weirwoods watching red-eyed from the trees, and the long cold that shaped both the land and the people who endured it. Then Winterfell, the great grey heart of the north, warm against the cold by the water in its walls, with its godswood and its black pool and its dead kings sleeping in the crypts below. A hall ruled by a family who believed duty and honour were the same word. And below it, the winter town and the northern Smallfolk, plain and wary and bound by guest right, who were the true character of that hard country far more than any lord. Then the Barrowlands, flat and treeless and full of ancient graves, and at their end, the ruined towers of Moat Cailin standing in the bog, the stone door with which the north had always kept the south out. Beyond it, the neck itself, the drowned country of reeds and lizard lions and fever, watched over by crannogmen no army could ever catch, the narrowest and most secret waste of the whole realm. Then the land opened and greened and filled with people. The Riverlands, soft and well-watered and crowded, rivers everywhere and mills and market towns and busy inns. River Run, where two rivers met, the crossings and the tolls, and the men who grew rich owning bridges. A glance east from the road showed the Vale walled off behind the mountains of the moon, the eyrie small and white among the clouds, a whole kingdom sealed away and left to watch while others fought. Then the Crownlands, softer and warmer still, the road fattening with carts and pilgrims and gold cloaks as the capital pulled everything toward itself. And at last, the city. The noise, the reek, the markets, and the sept and the crush of 500,000 lives, and above it all, the red keep and the throne. That is the country, laid end to end, and walking it teaches something no map can show, because a map makes the realm look whole and even, a single shape and a single colour. The road makes it plain that the realm is nothing of the kind. The distance from the wall to King's Landing is measured in leagues, 1,000 of them and more. But that is the smallest part of the distance. The real distance is the one between what the two ends are for. The wall exists to keep something out. It is the realm's oldest work, older than the throne, older than the kingdoms, built when men still remembered why it was needed. The wall asks for nothing but men to hold it, and receives less every year. A promise the country made in the dark, and has been slowly forgetting ever since. The throne exists to be sat upon. It is the realm's richest prize, the thing every ambition in the country leans toward, and it draws men the way the wall never could. A younger son with a sword rides south to the court, not north to the ice. The heat and the money and the hunger of Westeros all gather at the bottom of the map, around that one hard chair. And the men who reach for it rarely think of the frozen border 1,000 leagues behind their backs. So the walk, in the end, is a walk between a country's oldest quiet promise and its loudest greedy prize. The two things could not be less alike, and yet they belong to the same realm, tied by the same road. And a man can set out from one and arrive at the other without ever leaving his own kingdom. What lingers after the whole length of it is the emptiness in between the places that matter. The gift going to grass, the Barrowlands with their silent graves, the leagues of dark forest where a traveller might go a full day and meet no one. Westeros is far larger and far emptier than its lords ever seem to remember from inside their warm halls. Most of it is land, plain land, cold at the top and green in the middle, worked by people who will never see the court and never wish to. The great houses and the great city are a thin, bright crust over a vast, quiet, mostly indifferent country, and that is the last thing the road makes plain. The realm pours its warmth downward. It sends its wealth and attention south toward the throne, and it lets the north hold itself on the leavings. The men in black at the top guard a border against a danger the rest of the country has stopped believing in. The men in silk at the bottom guard their own seats at the table. Between them runs the long thread of road, carrying ravens and grain and armies up and down, joining the two ends into one country, whether either end wishes it or not. To walk Westeros from top to bottom is to feel how far apart its two ends truly are. It is to understand that a realm can be one country and still be divided against itself, split by simple attention, by which end it chooses to warm and which end it chooses to forget. The whole heat of the kingdom flows toward the throne in the south, and the cold wall of ice stands watch at its back, 1,000 leagues away, holding the oldest line in the world with a handful of men, while the country it protects looks the other way. That is the road from the wall to King's Landing. Ice at one end, blades at the other, and the whole living body of the realm strung between them. The empty north that no one wants, and the long green road down to everything men do. A single country, walked from its coldest edge to its hottest heart, leaning always southward, and turning its back on the wall of ice that keeps the dark out.